Ni hao lei ho, Joe-san. Good morning and morena tato. Wonderful to celebrate the 10 years of the Creative Mornings whānau. It's yeah, just such a delight. 10 years really does fly by when you're having fun, and in my case, slightly overworked and sleep deprived for the little human. But anyway, wonderful to see so many familiar faces online. But just wanted to start by acknowledging, definitely not a sole effort as well. Just want to say thank you to the amazing co-hosts over the years. Elise was there from the beginning when we had a bit of a Zoom call with Tina Roth Eisenberg, saying, and I think we're the 10th chapter at the time, saying, trust us to bring this here. It'll be great. Khan, who's really been my Creative Mornings rock over the years, from photographer to videographer to co-host and being the star of the show. You have been amazing. Ngā mihi nui e hoa. And Sarah, when I made the decision to kind of step back from Creative Mornings, Sarah Longbottom leaned in, which I'm incredibly grateful for. And after running Ngā Rangatai Tour and being a speaker herself, wonderful to have her there. And of course, the wonderful, exuberant and enthusiastic Laura with amazing smiles. Thank you, thank you, thank you for you and your team for putting this on virtually and in person. Some amazing, generous, I guess, yeah, volunteers over the years. You definitely know who you are. Definitely, there's probably some fave team members. I know that last time we sent out a survey, everyone really loved Khan. So do a +1 or pop your fave team member in the chat. It's going to be as interactive as possible for this one. And a huge thank you to the speakers. Again, it's all about the people, and speakers are often incredibly generous with their mātauranga and their knowledge, and they're sharing their expertise and their experience as well. And please pop your favorite speakers in the chat too. And last but not least, thank you to you. I know that we've been in this, lockdown haze. Everyone's languishing at the moment, including myself. And yeah, it's wonderful there's been so many wonderful events in different spaces as well. And I remember, Khan, when we would just run from month to month with a different setup, and you were an amazing, you're an amazing tech person as well, just so all around incredible creative human. So yeah, the audience that turns out rain or shine, online or offline, with or without coffee as well. So into it, 10 years, 10 designs and 10 lessons today. Throughout it all, I think I'm, constantly in one way or another, designing, learning, changing, growing, evolving. But before that, would love to, share a little bit about me and where I come from. So whakapapa back to Malaysia. My ancestors are originally from China, and realized through my dad and my dad's dad that there's an element of sacrifice in what you need to do today to create a better tomorrow. So just learned this recently, actually. And my granddad jumped on a ship with less than $5 in his pocket to find a better future. And my dad jumped on a plane and with less than $5,000 in his pocket to look for a better future as well. But originally born in Malaysia, in Jaya, just out of Kuala Lumpur. Migrated to Aotearoa, New Zealand when I was 2, and raised in Tamaki Makaurau, Auckland. And just want to say a shout out and awhi to Kataraina Davis here, who is mana whenua, a part of Ngāti Whātua Ōrākei, and where we live at the moment out in, grew up out west in Waitakere, and the local mana whenua here is Te Kaora Amaki, and most recently moved to Hobsonville. So out west, grew up in Kelston, bought a home in Glen Eden, and now recently lived in Hobsonville Point, where Te Kaora Maki and Ngāti Whātua ki Kaipara mana whenua here. So if you know, I know we're all calling from different lands around the world here. If you know the traditional owners of the land of where you're calling from, please pop it in the chat as well. Anyway, here to talk about design, but I have a bit of a confession to make. Not entirely sure if I'm a designer anymore. So when Laura approached me, I'm like, I haven't really designed products or things for quite a while, at least not in the traditional sense. I have had a bit of a design, I guess, career. So initially studied graphic design at AUT University. I see some AUT people in the room. I then started as a web designer and actually secret hidden, well, it's probably not a talent, but secret hidden skill around coding, hard coding HTML and CSS as a front-end developer. And then co-founded a bit of a design studio focused on social impact as well, which I'll speak a little bit about later on. But throughout that, there's been quite a few significant design shifts. So in my second year of uni, had a fortunate opportunity to do a student exchange to Mexico. And even though we grew up in a low socioeconomic community, my parents, are incredibly grateful for them to have never raised us to see social classes. And it wasn't, and Mexico's amazing, wonderful, beautiful, and vibrant, but it was, that was probably as naive as it was the first time that I'd kind of seen or experienced extreme wealth living next to extreme poverty in the area that I was in. Throughout that time as well, I guess my day job was more around designing for commercial purposes, and really my night and weekend job, I guess, was volunteering with Y Media, which was connecting tertiary students, not-for-profits and industry mentors, and some of the wonderful Y Media crew are here today as well. And of course, throughout that as well, really grew a strong heart for connecting communities, and Creative Mornings definitely being one of them. And yeah, so many more. But the biggest shift of all, little Phoenix, who is not so little anymore, she is a feisty, independent 4-year-old, and really started to shift my perspective, my sense of purpose, and I guess, yeah, my place in the world and how I wanted to design or create moving forward. So now I probably design more with a lowercase d than a capital D. I do a bit of co-design, I do a bit of participatory design, and I do a bit of strategic design with senior leaders and governors in social impact spaces. I've been called many things. I'm not going to read this list, but yeah, and worn many hats over the years as well. Mum, daughter, and my love calls me my love, as probably the key ones that will stay with me regardless of what professional hat I wear. I have my current day job at the moment as Director of Innovation and Partnerships at a social enterprise called Innovation Unit, and in my spare time, whatever that looks like, I have the privilege of serving on a few governance boards, both at a local level, at a regional level, and a national and ministerial level, as well as part of some wonderful change-making networks focused on, women entrepreneurship, super diversity, and governance and directorship, as well as the Edmund Hillary Fellowship, which is around connecting global change makers. I've learned many things and designed, so I've learned many lessons and designed many things, and just here are a few of my top 10. So here we go. So this one, time is your most precious asset. Choose how you spend your time and energy wisely. This might sound very simple to many of you, but it was a very hard lesson, and actually probably a lesson that I'm still learning, that often my little girl and my hubby, Adam, remind me of. So yeah, I think it's one of those things when you're really passionate about what you do, it's really hard to draw compassionate boundaries of yourself around when you should be at work, when you should be serving the community, and when you should be finding time for friends and whānau. So lockdown has been a wonderful kind of, silver lining gift that is, in some ways freed up some time, but in other ways probably filled up time with Zoom meetings as well. So that is, yeah, a constant reminder and a constant lesson that I keep learning. So the things that make you weird as a kid make you great today. So as an immigrant, as a woman of color, as a child growing up here, you tend to want to assimilate. You tend to not want to stand out, and you tend to try and hide yourself in different ways, or or adapt and change to the dominant paradigm. And it wasn't really until Falling Phoenix was born that really started to pique my curiosity around ethnic communities and how I could be an advocate in that area. Etereria Collective is a co-design initiative focused around microfinance and micro-enterprise initiatives for former refugee, new migrants, and forced migrants as well. They have a huge amount of capability and capacity to do amazing things, but often they aren't necessarily always given the opportunities here in Aotearoa. So this was an initiative that we kind of set up a couple of years ago. Fail Club. There is no such thing as failure, just learning. Definitely one of the social innovation mindsets that we're learning as well. I also forgot to mention, there's design partners down the side. So with any of these projects, I never design in isolation. There's always other people designing alongside me and collaborating alongside me as well. So this was actually, what do we do? It was like every 6 to 8 weeks, often we'd gather for breakfast. And, when you gather for things, often people talk about everything that's going right in their lives. And this was a really wonderful opportunity to exercise that resilience around what was going wrong. What had we failed at over the past, since the last time we caught up for breakfast, and asking why 3 times and trying to dig down and deep into the root cause as to why that was. Really opened up a sense of vulnerability and courage to be able to share in that really safe space, in that safe environment. Okay, the slightly controversial one. But a few years ago, kind of one of the many things I get roped into, but one of the things was a bit of a protest outside the Best Awards, kind of acknowledging the lack of diversity at design in the design space. Sometimes it's better and the learning here is sometimes it's better to create change on the inside versus the outside, and sometimes it's not. I think it's also trying to, I believe that the design, mainstream design sphere is definitely, hopefully improved. Admittedly, again, like I said, with an existential crisis before, don't know if I'm technically a designer anymore, so I don't necessarily know what's going on in that area, but it sounds like there is a bit more shared governance and shared responsibility, which is really wonderful to see. I guess from that experience as well, I was like, okay, so if we can't, at that moment in time, if people aren't open to shifting up the conversation around diversity and design, how might I take design to diverse communities? So again, a few years ago, there was a bit of a co-jam, as almost like a hackathon, but almost like a 48-hour design jam, kind of connecting with 100 rangatahi from diverse communities in the Tamaki area to really co-create a sense of belonging. So we had some design coaches there that were sharing their, design thinking capabilities and expertise, but then we had a whole raft of wonderful young people that were coaching and sharing their knowledge as well. So there was wonderful reciprocity in that around cultural capability and cultural competency, and what it sharing their own lived experience as well. We heard time and time again from our design mentors that it was unlike any other kind of traditional design hackathon environment that they'd been part of. The wonderful thing here as well was that at this point in time, I was working at New Zealand's or Australia's largest philanthropic organisation, and the idea of encouraging them to share power, which is really hard to do for a philanthropic organisation, and trying to unlock funds at the beginning. Again, there was a a judging panel, or we called it a wise council, and they didn't choose the winning idea that we would take forward that would receive the grant funding. The community voted on and decided collectively what they would want to take forward as well. So this was just a really different way of working, different way of being, and different way of doing things that traditionally funders don't necessarily do. So, and could do more of. Anyway, lesson here. Okay, so this one, this one is, I guess, the realization that have fortunate opportunity to be able to create change at a regional level and even at a national level. And sometimes we forget around what's outside our front doorstep as well, and what's happening at a neighborhood level. So Adam and I are walking around the neighborhood and saying, oh, there's so much amazing potential here. If only someone did something. And then we realized, one, if you complain about things 3 times and you don't do something about it, you either you have to shut up about it and move on. And so we decided to gather our friends that lived in the wider neighborhood together to do something. And the lesson here is really the power of grassroots, intergenerational and intercultural community-led initiatives. Once we put the call out, there were wonderful volunteers of all sorts of ages and all sorts of cultures that were really wanting to come together to welcome the newcomers into the neighborhood as well. We know that Tamaki Makaurau is constantly shifting and changing. The demographics are shifting and changing, and also there's increasing intensification across the board. So really important that how might we reach out to our neighbours a little bit more? How might we create that social cohesion and social inclusion in the communities that we live, as well as the workplaces that we choose to be, as well as the governance boards that we might serve on as well. Oh, this one is probably a lesson I learned previously, but it's always about learning, unlearning, and relearning as well, how to do things, and sometimes not how to do things, but really co-designing, innovating with people and not for people. So currently based innovation unit, and one of our biggest co-design projects is I think co-designing with 100 people from across Bermuda around redesigning the education system there. A bit closer to home, we're working on working with and co-designing with ethnic young people around what it would take to kind of look at creating policy change. And then, there's a whole raft of other wonderful projects. Such a privilege to be able to work in this space and work on some really meaningful mahi with an incredible team of wonderful associates that some of them are joining today. An incredibly supportive board as well. So huge privilege to be able to do some of this work on a day-to-day basis. Okay, so this was quite a hard lesson to learn. Wasn't quite sure if I was ready to learn it at the time, but it is what it is. And, one of the realizations was you can do anything, but you can't do everything. And when I found out that I was pregnant with my little Pepe, made that decision to, it really felt like having to give up one baby that you had created over the years for another baby that you hadn't necessarily met yet. But from what I hear, it's amazing, and it's going from strength to strength. They've had a new rebrand, they've expanded their team, they've done incredible projects and huge mihi and aroha to Eddie and Khan and the wider creative crew there. It's inspiring to see what you're doing from afar to make the world a little bit better. And so, Creative Mornings, the lesson here, there's so many lessons here. I think I swapped out this lesson a few times. Thanks for your feedback, Laura. I think the reason why I joined Creative Mornings, or put my hand up for it, was I have a huge aversion to public speaking. I get massive fear, but it was about leaning into the fear and doing it anyway, and being comfortable with being uncomfortable. Creative Mornings was definitely the first foray into that, and now I serve on a few governance advisory boards where I'm the youngest person there. I'm often the only woman sometimes, and often the only person of colour. So really hard to be able to hold that space with confidence, but also compassion as well with where people are at on their own journey. This was the last Creative Mornings that we had at MoTAT that I was officially co-hosting. Up there was on the front with Khan, and yeah, I think by that point I was a little bit more confident with public speaking and being on stage. And last but not least, this is a bit of a cheesy one, excuse the pun, but yeah, people and relationships are everything. This is again one of those things you get roped into, a bit of a random side hustle that we accidentally, Anna, who's on the call, accidentally registered a domain name. Then we accidentally took some photos and got planned out. And then we accidentally managed to win, get our crowdfunding and crowd equity funding across the line as well. So this is all wonderful, fortunate surprises, serendipitous, fortunate accidents. I guess the other lesson here is if you want something done, give it to a busy person, because wonderful people here, also wonderful friends. Sylvia's director at PwC, Lani heads up the Vodafone Foundation, Anna runs Pledge Me, as well as so many other wonderful things. And Hugh, I think he often gets roped into things because of Lani as well as Lani's hubby. But yeah, that is kind of my lessons so far. So I guess I encourage you to reflect back over the past 10 years of your life. And what are those lessons learned? And how might you design your life and use that to design your life over the next 10 years as well? For me, people are asking what's happening over the next 10 years. And to be honest, I don't know. I used to have a really dorky 15-year plan. Don't have that anymore. Plans change. Plans completely go out the door. But over the next 10 years, you're really making the hard decisions. And I guess there's that element of sacrifices that you need to make today for a better tomorrow. And to be able to design the life that we need now. For me, I'm really trying to practice and embody this, working with my wonderful leadership coach around moving from doing all the time and being busy all the time. So moving from a state of doing to a state of being and leaning into being present. Moving from leading teams or projects or organizations to more governing, initiatives or collectives or supporting and coaching leaders. If we're wanting to really truly create social change and sustainable social change, we really need to think at a systems level. And what does that systems change look like? And moving from, more traditional design craft to design doing to design thinking, and more moving into the systems thinking area, which I'm still learning about, always learning. And of course, we'll be continuing to design, probably with a lowercase d, always continuing to learn and always changing. Change is the only constant in life. So if you're not changing, you're not growing, you're not living. So 10 years, 10 designs and 10 lessons. And I just thought I'd end with this quote because I think it's really pertinent. I didn't really focus this particular presentation on design for social impact or design for social innovation. My life has definitely been more of a squiggly line, but that's probably the central thread through them all. But I agree with Terry around, believe the biggest issue for professional designers as well as experts, professional designers and creatives, as well as experts from all fields of disciplines, how to address the many complex and wicked problems confronting us in the 21st century. In this last bit around, these problems cannot be solved by a single discipline or profession. It requires radical collaboration across multiple fields and multiple disciplines, and a co-design process with the stakeholders with lived experience connected to and affected by the problem. So wonderful article that I managed to read a few weeks ago. So I'll pop it in the chat or follow up with something. But yeah, kia ora, share, and thank you. Would welcome any questions. That was definitely more of a ramble than a articulate talk, but also really open for virtual coffees as well. I always think that you meet something new and learn something from everyone that you meet. So always try and set aside a coffee with a new person each week. There's my Twitter handle, my LinkedIn, and I just recently set up a Calendly if you wanted to pop something in there. So that's pretty much it.
The first one that I spotted was from Ryan, which is an interesting one. It's over the last 10 years, where have you found, what's an example of where you found joy where you maybe didn't expect to find some joy? Just to hit you with a tough one.
Yeah, that's a good question, Ryan. Oh, joy. I feel like I find joy everywhere. I think if I don't find joy, then that's probably a question where you start to reflect whether it's the right place to be. I think probably less joyful places can be sometimes having the hard and courageous conversations at a governance board around the table when you're making decisions. And often my perspective, my lived experience is quite different to others around the table. So, but I always try and present my arguments or perspectives in a compassionate way, understanding that where people are, and always trying to bring a little bit of joy into that too. Also, maybe, to be honest, having a newborn and changing a whole bunch of diapers is not always that joyful, but the pros definitely outweigh the cons. I remember at the time, I didn't share this, but during the first 3 months of my parental leave, I did a 100 mums project. So it was really looking at empathy interviews with 100 mums around how they balance a career that they love and a family that they love. And it was my way to stay sane throughout that process and still remain creative while also changing lots of nappies.
I love it. Awesome. The next one is from Cheese Cartel conspirator Anna. What is exciting you the most at the moment?
Oh, Anna. This doesn't sound quite old lady-ish, but the garden. So, and my plants, I'm like a terrible plant mom, but I managed to save at least 80% of them over the past few months since I moved into this new home. We've joined the local community garden because I don't know anything about planting, to learn from the more mature residents in our area as well, and just trying to live a slightly lighter life and a bit more of a local life here as well, and really look forward to welcoming you, Anna, and the rest of the fab females once we can gather to our new home and our new community.
From Danielle, how do you break into new spaces, particularly career-wise, in a place like New Zealand where it's not cool to be self-promoting?
Oh, break into new spaces. I feel like they're slightly two different questions, but I think that New Zealand has this wonderful ability, 5.5 million people, where everyone is connected through, 2 degrees of separation in some way, shape, or form. And if you frame it right, then most people are open to at least one cup of coffee. And I tend to, if I'm wanting to learn something new or break into a new space, I would find the person that's best at it and try and find a way to have a warm introduction as opposed to going in cold. But there has been moments where I have gone in cold too. So for Creative Mornings, for example, again, not a more of an international example, but just following Tina Roth-Eisenberg for a couple of years, and surely someone's going to bring Creative Mornings here. I've got too much on my plate at this moment in time, so I'll park it for now. And it was 2 years, no one had really done anything. And I was like, oh, okay, maybe now's the time. And so just reached out. And I think it's, if you reach out and the intent is right, then most people are willing to make that time for you. In terms of self-promoting, I don't know, actually, about that one. I would say, actually, I was on this talk recently around to reframe self-promoting as a way of sharing what you're doing and sharing and contributing to the world. So that was a really wonderful reframe for me as well. I think now with where I'm at, I feel like there's, in some spheres of my life, there's a sense of leadership where you know, leaning into advocating for women and for ethnic women and economic empowerment for ethnic women as well. So that's something that I am unashamedly self-promoting about. So many wonderful questions.
There are so many coming through. If you do need to go to work or do need to head off, that's absolutely fine, team. But there's a ton of questions, so we'll keep going for now. This next one might actually need a coffee, but maybe you can share a couple of quick tips or ideas, Jade. And apologies if I pronounce any names wrong, but Inyana has asked, said they'd love to know more about how you got into governance. Is there any kind of quick insights on that big question?
I've had this conversation quite a few times recently. I kind of accidentally fell into it, Anjana. So when I went on parental leave and departed from Creative Mornings and also Curative at the time, I just found myself with a little bit more time on my hands. So I was looking at ways that I could contribute to the community still and, remain sane. So I put my hand up for the Ethnic Peoples Advisory Panel for Auckland Council. So Auckland Council has 6 demographic panels: the Ethnic Panel, Pacific Peoples Panel, Disability, Youth and Seniors Panel, and one other one, I can't remember, sorry. And I'd always been on the interviewing side, and I thought, maybe it'd be a good opportunity to explore what it'd be like on the other side. And so got my first foray into a bit of an advisory or governance role there. And then from that, people observed what I was doing around the table and started shoulder tapping me for other opportunities. So a few of them were more local based, like Community Waitakere or Waitakere Ethnic Board, serve on the Strategic Leaders Group of Healthy Families Waitakere, and it's really through word of mouth. But yeah, it is, it's often, unfortunately or fortunately, is sometimes about who you know around that table. Connecting with ministers and MPs is also a really good way to for them to be able to awhi and support you into those positions. And actually the Super Diversity Institute just released, and they just released it yesterday as well. They opened up their applications again for the top diverse boards. So if you're interested, I can pop the link in the chat or something, or just type in Super Diversity. They had an influx of inquiries about it. So that's also a good way to start.
Awesome, thank you. This might be my favorite question from Katarina, which is, what helps you to win the day?
Great question, Katarina. Helps me to win the day. So I start my day off with yoga meditation with my little phoenix. Every morning in bed we meditate together. It's like it's headspace, so it's like animated meditation. So that kind of starts the day off right. We have smoothies together, we have breakfast together as a little whānau. And then the rest of the day is often a bit of a blur, but I just really love at the end of the day having a walk around the neighborhood, having a glass of wine and some cheese sometimes. I think the anchor points, it's like the moments in between, and I think lockdown has reminded me of that as well. As I heard from a kuya towards the end of last year around how she kind of stays resilient throughout the day and win the day. She's like, remind yourself to connect with yourself first at the beginning of the day, and then connect with your whānau, and then connect with the wider community as well. And so that was a good reminder of how if you're not really filling your cup, it's really hard to fill anyone else's cup and win the day. Great question though.
Awesome question. What I'm taking from that is that Jade says it's okay to have wine and cheese at the end of every day. How are you going, Jade? Do you have time for a couple more questions?
Yeah, all good.
Cool. This is an interesting one from Simone. the Kiwi number eight wire approach to solving problems is clearly still evident here in Aotearoa. Do you think that as a problem solving technique, it's still relevant?
Great question, Simone. I really think it depends on context for that one. I think in terms of number 8 wire mentality and applying that to a design space, with design thinking and co-design and social innovation, it is often just, fast prototyping and fast learning as you go. But with the amazing work that you do, Simone, I don't know if you'd want a fast prototype and fast learn from that, because they are, infrastructure design projects, beautiful projects that would be really hard to do. Is it still relevant? I guess the trend that I'm seeing across design and advertising, but mainly design agencies, is that is really interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary, and I still do believe that we're probably more generalists than specialists here in Aotearoa. But that could just be my approach to things,
Awesome. I'm getting a little lost in the chat. There's so many questions, but in amongst them is just wonderfully lovely messages and helpful ones too. So if anyone's interested in the Super Diversity Institute, Narayan has popped that link into the chat. So check that out. Thank you, Narayan.
Thanks, Narayan.
Where were we? There was something about imposter syndrome. Yes. Which tools, if any, do you deploy to fight against the dreaded imposter syndrome?
Oh, I don't know if there's any tools. I do my homework. So I guess I get more imposter syndrome at some of the governance roles that I'm serving on at the moment. But yeah, just do your homework, read all the board papers, and when you are about to say something. So for example, you're in a 2-hour meeting and you have 2 minutes to speak to the minister. So you have to make sure that 2 minutes is really, really succinct, really, really articulate, and hits the points that you're trying to make. Also slightly awkward when your daughter comes in in that 2 minutes as well, and you're mentally prepared, you've got your notes and everything, and then something else comes in and sabotages the 2 minutes. But everyone's been really understanding and empathetic as well. I think there's also wonderful about, people are just people. And imposter syndrome is a really natural part of life. I think if you're not having imposter syndrome, then it reminds me of this quote around, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. So I'm really fortunate to be in rooms where I'm constantly learning and growing from the wisdom of those that have gone before me, around me. And that's really wonderful too, and really humbling experience actually, but not really. And I think it's just being prepared and just really trying to speak your truth where you can. People respect that, hopefully.
Cool. All right, we've got, I want to say, lucky last 3 questions, but they look like big ones. So we'll see how we go. Can you share a little bit about the mentoring and coaching experiences you've had? How to find someone that you click with creatively?
Yes, sometimes my mentors and coaches aren't necessarily creative professionals. So maybe so most of my mentors and coaches aren't professionals. So Louise Mara, wonderful Louise, is one of my leadership coaches, and she is an informal mentor. She's been supportive throughout the get-go, from Creative Days to Leadership New Zealand and everything else. And we probably connect more at a spiritual level than a creative level. I have another couple of other mentors like Marissa Fong, who is incredibly astute businesswoman, and we connect at I probably more of a woman of color level, and how do we navigate this world together as women of color, and so that's again not a creative level, but she is also gives me financial advice as well. There's so many other informal mentors, but they're the two that keep coming to mind and that I often go back to if and when I need to make big decisions in my lives, or like a fork in the road, just to get their perspective as well. And they're my truth tellers in the most compassionate and kind way. Oh, you're on mute, Laura. Classic.
It wouldn't be a Zoom if I didn't do it at least once.
Exactly.
Next one, thank you, is I love how this starts. You are a master of co-design. What can you do to make the more introverted people comfortable sharing their ideas with the team?
I think it's just practice. I think, well, there's definitely other masters of co-design on this call. I don't know if I'll call myself one, but I think the beauty of co-design is just doing it and practicing and growing and evolving and iterating that as you move through that design process. I think sometimes just being really honest, hey, I'm incredibly nervous. This is not something that I usually do, but I'm going to give it my best shot. And, you know, almost like setting out that context up front. People are generally pretty compassionate. Those that are less compassionate spaces are probably at those governance and roles. But, you know, even that, I've always gone in saying, hey, you know, I'm still learning. I'm about governance, really open to any constructive feedback that you might have. And yeah, I would love to catch up for coffee outside of the boardroom or something like that. So I think if you're just, again, really honest, don't feel you have to have everything sorted right up front. People are pretty compassionate and understanding.
Cool. Awesome. And the lucky last, we're a couple minutes past 9, but this is a great relevant way to end it. From Carol, from your perspective, how has the COVID lockdown environment allowed creatives to focus and innovate, or is this time to be a part of system change in a real way for different pathways for better futures?
Oh, such a great question. My mind is going everywhere. I don't know. I think I go back to lockdown and the languishing kind of thing. I think the first lockdown, people were like super motivated, like, yeah, I'm going to do a side hustle. I'm going to like do online creative courses. I'm going to learn as much as possible. And I think this particular lockdown has been really hard on people, including myself. I think if you really want to be moving into that systems change area, or, you know, moving into design for social change or system change, I would say with the social change element, like find a social issue that you're really passionate about and do your research around who is already doing that mahi on the ground, and go in and volunteer and help out and support, support and walk alongside them. Around the systems level change, again, it's a relatively new space for me, and I'm still learning that, and I'm probably practicing that more in my governance roles. Like, what are the leverage points, the conversations, the decisions that you need to make at a governance level to be able to create the outcomes that you're wanting for the communities that you're trying to serve. So I feel like they're like 3 questions pushed into one. In terms of, I think the last thing is just being really honest with yourself and where you're at. Like, don't feel that you need to be creating things all the time, and, you know, easier said than done, but need to be creating things all the time. I think feel into where your energy is and how you show up in the world. And I think that that's often in its own way changing the systems around you too. Hopefully that helps.
I think that definitely helps. And I think that is a really beautiful way to end it.